myself, and I'm going to turn this over to the Secretary of the National Organization of Parents of Blind Children, Carol Castellano, to introduce our speaker.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I am amazed that we are finding a way to offer the cane walk this year, first of all. Whoever thought we would be doing this virtually. But I'm extremely glad that we're able to do it because the National Organization of Parents of Blind Children began this cane walk way back, I believe, in 1995. And that was the time of the great Joe Cutter, who really revolutionized cane use for kids. And our instructor tonight has been a part of the cane walk almost from the beginning. Jeff Altman is a cane instructor in Nebraska and an expert on the structured discovery method. And Jeff is a wonderful travel instructor and a great friend of blind children and their families. Jeff has never turned us down when we've asked him to help us with anything, and he's been saying yes to leading this cane walk for many, many years. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Jeff Altman.
Well, thank you, Carol. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I want to thank all of the families who are participating in this year's cane walk. I think that this is going to be a very positive experience for your children and your whole family. I also want to say thank you to all of the instructors that are taking part in this. It is terrific of you folks to give up your time for these events, and this year to be so flexible and willing to go with things as we work our way through what has been perhaps the least favorite of my years so far. But that aside, I am very pleased we've been able to pull off the cane walk, and I know that the people you work with are definitely going to benefit from it. Now, for parents, one of the things that's very important for me to say to you is that you are your child's first and most important instructor. Those of us that teach cane travel are only able to devote a certain amount of time to each of the people that we work with. We are always going to do our best to help your child develop and to learn the skills that are going to help them be independent and self-sufficient. But it's going to be your encouragement, your ongoing work with them, and your efforts to understand orientation and mobility that are going to make this work. Now, some of the tools that we bring to this, the physical things, is the longer white cane. It's a fiberglass cane, it's lightweight. And when we say longer, it's because it, unlike a conventional cane, comes up to the average person's between the chin and nose. For a child, we go with a bit longer, as much as up to the forehead, so that children who have a hard time centering a cane, they can still get the coverage they need. It's kind of natural for a child's arm to be down at their side instead of centered in front of their body. As they mature, as they grow, it becomes easier, and the cane technique will become neater and more effective. But the most important part of the cane is it allows your child to get out and move around safely and find the things in the environment that they need to be interacting with. Another tool that we bring to this is the learning shades or sleep shades, depends on what particular agency our instructors work with. The idea of using the sleep shades or the blindfold is to allow your child to learn the non-visual techniques. We're not predicting that your child is going to have less eyesight as they get older, but what we recognize is that if you are blind, your vision is not reliable. There may be circumstances where a blind person's remaining eyesight works very, very well. but there's going to be a lot of situations. In fact, the majority of things in their daily lives really need to be done using non-visual alternatives. And that way they can be effective, efficient, and safe. And that's what we want for every blind person. Now, of course, the two most important tools that we bring to this learning process, first of all, is structured discovery. Structured discovery is basically the idea of learning from experience. Now, of course, everyone says that experience is the best teacher, and that's perfectly true. The only problem with that is you might have to do an awful lot of experiencing before you figure out what it is you're there to learn. And that's where the structure comes in. Structured learning is the type of learning you probably experienced in high school, where you're in a classroom and everybody is learning the same thing at the same time, and it's very regimented and very specific. Discovery learning is that type of learning that happens when you're out on your own and you end up just plain figuring things out. Now, when you are just out there trying to figure things out, as I said, that could take a lot of time. And it isn't always the most effective way to learn, and it isn't always the safest way to learn. So we blend the two things. Some things are better learned through structure, for example, how to use a cane. Other things, more advanced skills, such as how to cross streets or how to solve the problem when you get lost when you're out traveling somewhere, those are the things that are best learned through discovery. And by blending the two together, we end up with a very effective means of instruction. Now, the last tool, and this is the most important one, and that is the philosophy of the National Federation of the Blind. It is really and truly important that people take to heart, not just at the intellectual level, but at the gut level, the understanding of blindness and the understanding that blindness is not what defines you. What defines you is all of the different characteristics you have, including your blindness. And we want people to develop confidence. And so with a combination of the right type of teaching techniques, the right kind of experience, and a positive philosophy, that's when you're going to have the most likelihood of success. So I want to be able to help you folks to understand those things. I know that the instructors will be helping you to understand it as well. I also, though, want you to get yourself involved. The more involved you are with the Parents of Blind Children Division and with the National Federation of the Blind, the better understanding of blindness you'll have. And because you have that better understanding, that's something that you can help your son or daughter to take into their own lives. It's a very important thing to know that you're not alone. And that's a big part of why all of us are federationists. So I'm not used to having a direct audience, so it's a little bit awkward for me to speak to you in this way. But we're going to open it up here in a little bit for some questions. So I hope that all of you have been thinking about things and considering what you want to ask. And if you weren't able to join us here on this opening event, also please know that I've been sending out emails to families, and you are absolutely welcome to write to me or call me during this period of time, so that the next week or two, if you do have questions that you think of. Melissa, I'm sort of running out of the things that I wanted to say. I thought maybe it would go a little longer than it did. So shall we open it up for questions?
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic. Questions, or of course, instructors, if you have anything that you would like to add, this would be a perfect time to do that. please raise your hand. You can do that by hitting *9 on your phone. You can find it in your app under the More section, and on a computer it's Alt-Y to raise your hand. Or you can put something in the chat box, and Kristen is our host, and she will be happy to call on people or read your chat questions or comments. So Kristen, do we have anybody that wants to speak?
Yes.
Great.
All right, Carol.
Here's my question, Jeff.
Okay.
Do we expect little children to pick up a cane and learn good technique right away?
That's a great question, Carol. Thank you. What we really expect is over time for a child to develop, just as a sighted child would. And what is one of the most critical things in the development of a child into adulthood is age appropriateness. You know, you don't expect a 3-year-old who is sighted to go out and cross a busy street. And you certainly shouldn't expect that of a blind child either. But your 14-year-old who goes to the store for you, if your 14-year-old happens to be blind, they should be able to do the same thing, you know, depending upon their particular level of skill at that point. Of course, everyone develops a little bit differently, and you know that's the same thing with adults. You know, we have adult students that some of whom master crossing very large intersections, 8-9 lanes wide. We also have adults that, frankly, have a tough time, you know, getting out and going around the block. And what I suggest is when you're looking at expectations for your child, of course, look at age appropriateness, but also take into account all of the other characteristics that your child has, maturity, learning style, and so forth. And ask yourself the question, you know, what should I expect of my child if my child were not blind?
Okay, we have another question from Justin Salisbury.
Okay. Hi, Justin.
Yeah, so one thing that I'll hear sometimes from parents who attend the cane walk, they hear about structured discovery, they think, hey, this is pretty cool. They go back into their district and they say to the schools and the administrators, the TVIs, etc., we would like my child to get structured discovery instruction. And the schools say, oh yeah, we already do that. And sometimes it's hard for the parents to really know what that means and if or what they should ask for. So I'm wondering how you would respond to a parent that gets into that kind of situation.
Well, I guess the first thing to do is ask for the credentials of the O&M instructor. If the instructor does not have NOMC after their name, National Orientation and Mobility Certification, there's a very good chance that that person is not that familiar with structured discovery. Now, there are exceptions to that, and there are people who hold both certifications and people who have developed those skills from exposure to the National Federation of the Blind and the NBPCB, National Blindness Professional Certification Board, and exposure, of course, to fellow O&M instructors who happen to have the NOMC. Now, to understand what structured discovery is also is a matter of understanding the manner in which things are presented. In a conventional instructional program, there are very specific things laid out and they're presented in a very specific way, and they follow a set sequence of introducing those skills, which works to some degree for some folks. But most people actually do better in a situation where you're presenting things in a way that focuses on the child developing problem-solving skills, that helps the child to get a greater sense of independence and the desire to get out and explore. You know, encouraging those normal types of drives in a child. Conventional instructor will tend to be very restrictive of the child's activity, you know, following specific guidelines on what to do and when to do it. And this can create in a child, as well as an adult, a sense of dependence. And that's what we want to try to move away from. We want each person that we work with to move to their own level of independence. And when we talk about independence, what we say is independence is going where you want, when you want, doing what you wish, without inconveniencing yourself or others. And so if you're not finding that kind of philosophy in an instructor, you need to be finding out what's going on. You need to be getting very serious about it. And at IEPs, you need to invite a representative of the National Federation of the Blind to come and join you if at all possible, to help your child get the opportunities that he or she needs to really fully develop. So, hope that answered your question there, Justin.
Yeah, thank you. You know, that's a scenario that I hear about from families a lot of times. Another question that seems to come up, if I may keep the mic in my hand here and ask a second one, I suppose, you know, is sometimes the families have been warned or told by the schools and the teachers that structured discovery is something that's just not appropriate for children. It's dangerous. They'll drive your kid around with a blindfold on and drop them off somewhere, and it's like they're trying to get the kid lost and lead them to their death. I mean, a lot of the parents have been told crazy things to try to make them afraid. What would you say to a parent in that situation?
Well, I would say to the parent, of course, that we're going to work with your child on age-appropriate skills. It is not appropriate to take any child out for a ride in the car and drop them off and say, find your way home. You know, maybe an older teenager might be ready for something like that, but that's not the normal case. And we are not cruel. We are not lacking empathy. We are not wanting to instill any kind of fear in your child. We want your child to have a sense of adventure and to have confidence in their ability to function in the world. And of course, we want you to be involved in all of that. You know, there's always a certain degree of disagreement between schools of thought on any particular subject. Conventionally trained instructors have, quite honestly, been indoctrinated with the idea that independent cane travel is both difficult and dangerous. And this has not been my experience, and I do not believe it is the experience of the majority of blind people who have gone through a structured discovery program. And we want your child to have the opportunity to experience that. And we are going to work with you. You will see that what we do is not dangerous. It is not going to be over the top as far as how we handle things. And, you know, if you'd like, we can put you in touch with families who have had their children go through structured discovery learning, and you can find out firsthand from them. Do you get the feeling I've negotiated these things a few times?
Absolutely.
Okay, next I believe Carol has a comment or question.
Okay.
Jeff, I've noticed that people use different kinds of canes,
Mm-hmm.
and that NFB members tend to use a cane that looks different from the more conventional one that you see. So I
Mm-hmm.
was wondering if you could tell us what kind of cane you recommend and maybe explain some of the differences between cane styles.
Okay. Now, so that folks know, originally when I went through training, I went through a conventional program, and for many years, I used the style of cane that they recommend and they use in their instruction. The type of cane I use now is a long fiberglass cane. It's hollow, it's lightweight, has some flexibility to it, and it has a metal tip. And several of the advantages to it, first of all, it's very much more sensitive than the type of cane that I used when I was using a conventional one. Its greater length allows you to have your arm in a more comfortable position so that you are able to travel more easily and for further distances. It allows you to pick up information from the environment beyond the cane tip touching the ground, because it creates a very distinctive tone that goes out and bounces off of objects in the environment to give you echolocation. It also provides good audio feedback as far as the texture of the ground that you're touching. And so you have lots of reaction time and lots of information to work with. The conventional cane usually is measured to 5 centimeters above the base of the sternum. This type of cane was developed in World War II at the Valley Forge Army Medical Hospital by a fellow named Richard Hoover. Dr. Hoover wanted to improve things for blind people. He did that by observing blinded veterans and looked at what the ones that were having greater success were doing. He also worked on coming up with what we refer to as two-tap. Conventional folks will often say two-point touch, where you arc the cane and touch the cane down on each side as you walk forward, swinging it opposite of your footsteps. This was a revolution for blind people. Before that, there really was no formalized training. But something happened between the days of Dr. Hoover's efforts and where we are today, and that is that that approach sort of stagnated. The cane has advanced very little since that time. The techniques have advanced very little since that time. And rather than using a blindfold, they are tending more to try to get people to rely on their eyesight in addition to using a cane, or in some cases, walking around without a cane. There are a variety of problems with that. For one thing, being blind means your eyesight isn't reliable. And if you are trained to rely on that eyesight, it's very easy to overlook the benefits and the information that comes from the use of the cane. I have a nephew from New Jersey who went through that type of training. And he was taught to rely on his eyesight more than really his cane at that time. He has the same eye condition I have, so it was declining. And he got a job as a programmer in Philadelphia, and he was living in Lindenwold, New Jersey, and he would hop on the Paco high-speed line to go to work each day. But one morning he came up and he was running late, and as he was walking along the train looking for an entrance, he saw an opening, turned and stepped off of the platform. The problem is it wasn't a door on the train. It was a gap between two trains, and he fell down onto the rails. He split the back of his head open, knocked himself out. I'm sorry, I had a phone call that just kind of jumped in there for a second. In any case, fortunately, someone walking by saw its foot sticking out, and that's why he's still alive, because the train that time of the morning would leave every 7 minutes. And so he came very close to being run over by one of the trains. So I believe very firmly that learning non-visual skills with a good long period of experience under the learning shades is going to make a tremendous difference in a person's life, because yeah, the eyesight can be a very much convenient thing to have in certain situations. But if you really want something that's reliable, you have to have faith in the cane and faith in non-visual skills. I hope that answered your question, Carol.
Okay, next we have Justin.
Pardon?
So here in Pennsylvania, some of the parents of blind children are being told that they cannot decorate their kids' canes, or their kids cannot decorate their own canes. In some cases, there are kids that are decorating their canes in order to feel more proud of them, and they just enjoy doing that. And then there are some parents that are being told that the canes can only be red and white, and that's it, or maybe only white, and that's it. And so what advice would you have to parents who are in that dilemma?
Well, first of all, kids need to be kids, and they need to enjoy what they're doing. And if it encourages them to use a cane, I don't care if they paint it purple. Now, parents should be aware of the state laws regarding the white cane. One of the things that's important to understand is the white cane law is actually the first civil rights act for the blind. It was created by blind people going in and educating members of their legislature to understand that there needed to be something that gave blind people the right to be out on the street. Prior to the white cane law, if a blind person was walking down a sidewalk and a car jumped the curb and hit them, the blind person was automatically at fault because they had no right to be out on the street. The white cane law changed that. But understanding the law and educating your child about it. But in reality, a child that is young and wants to decorate their cane is probably perfectly fine doing that. In Pennsylvania, I happen to know that under the state law, the fine for a violation of the white cane law is $25. And to give you some perspective, the state law there for littering is $300. So, there's a little issue of values there. The important thing about the cane is that if a person is, preparing to cross the street, the driver may see the cane, may recognize the individual as blind, and may give them the right of way that they're supposed to. As we all know, that doesn't necessarily happen. And really, as a skilled traveler, that's not what you rely on to stay safe. You rely on your own skills and your own understanding of what's going on in the environment. So. Anyone else?
This is Melissa, and
Carol?
I just wanted to say that I'm just wondering about kids that have a lot of residual vision. I sometimes hear parents say things like, well, my child doesn't need to use a cane right now, or we're getting the cane kind of just in case. What are your thoughts about that, and how do you really encourage kids I mean, I think there's two things. So I think there's two things that I hear. I either hear my child doesn't need to use a cane, or I hear the parents say, my child really needs to use a cane. And sometimes it's the child that says, I don't want to. Or sometimes it's just that the child is a child and doesn't use it, as well as they could or should. So sort of what do you do in those kinds of situations? How do you encourage parents or help parents understand when a cane is helpful, and how do you help kids understand when a cane is helpful and why it's important to use it and have it with them at all times?
So, well, I'll begin with the issue of the parent that is perhaps feeling a bit uncomfortable about their child using a cane and looking different. As a professional, as many papers as I may have hanging on the wall, I can't get inside of somebody else's head any more than parents can get inside the head of their own child. We don't know for sure what works for that child and what doesn't. We don't know the thinking process behind the child's desire not to use a cane, although we can make a pretty good guess that a lot of times it's a combination of peer pressure or possibly parents, because they feel uncomfortable, the child feels uncomfortable. Now, that being said, if a child learns non-visual skills and they grow up and go on to not really use them all that much, nothing is really lost. But on the other hand, if a child doesn't learn those skills and really does need them, they're going to have less of a quality of life than they might otherwise have had. And the best person to decide what they need is the child themselves as they grow up. Now, certainly when they get into middle school and high school, the desire to have a cane or other tools that people identify as being part of blindness, it's going to become an issue. They want to fit in. They want to be like all of their friends. And that's probably the toughest time. I mean, my daughter, who was sighted when she was little, I gave her a toy cane. She broke an overhead light with it, but she, really kind of admired what I was doing. And so if an adult in that child's life has a teaching cane and is willing to work with their child on using the cane properly, a young child is going to be very encouraged to do it. And as a child moves into their teen years, which is a tough time for any child and any family, they're going to make some decisions about what is right for them and what isn't. They're going to probably struggle a little bit with that. But I think also if they are at a point where they've developed confidence in the cane and confidence in themselves, appropriate to that age, they're going to be much better off. So, of course, you can't always start young. Sometimes blindness comes on in, the teenage years, and that's tough. But getting those children around other children that are blind, that they can develop friendships with and find role models among, as well as role models among blind and sighted adults, those are the things that are going to make a difference. And slowly but surely, sliding in a few slices of a positive philosophy of blindness over time is really going to help a lot. If your child is blind at, say, age 10, and their older sibling at age 14 goes to the grocery store for you, and they go alone, that child is thinking about how, when they're that age, they can go to the grocery store. And if blindness is the only issue, it's a perfectly reasonable goal for them to be doing something along those lines. And it's also perfectly reasonable for that younger child to be accompanying their older sibling to go to places like that. Give them that opportunity to be kids and, yes, even get a few scraped knees and into a little bit of trouble here and there.
Okay, Carol, then Winford.
Okay. Hi, Carol.
Hello. I've heard that even babies can benefit from a cane, and I was wondering if you think that's true.
Oh, absolutely. With a blind child, you want to get a cane in their hand as soon as you can. Now, Deb's and my niece just recently had a baby girl, and she has the condition my wife and her sister have, Ricker's anomaly. And we are working with her, trying to get her the information she needs to help her daughter along. We haven't broached the issue of a cane yet. The baby is like 3 weeks old, so. But soon, I'm hoping that the child will have a cane to, especially once she starts crawling, that she can have with her. And yeah, she's going to play with it maybe more than she's going to use it, but it needs to become a part of how she lives her life, what she does every day. And as she starts walking, getting her to swing the cane out in front of her to feel for things. Also helping her to develop echolocation and other orientation skills that will help her to stay safe and help her to stay oriented. And all of those things, it does take time, just as it does with a sighted child, to learn to have the right judgment and to have the right understanding of what they are experiencing in the environment. So, Joe Cutter always said, as soon as they can grasp the cane, have them holding on to one. And you can do other things too, including, let them play with a wooden spoon. Other things that they can kind of probe the environment with. That answer your question, Carol?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Winford's next.
Alert, audio now unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of things that I was thought about when Jeff, Salisbury,
Alert, the host has acknowledged
when you
your
were
raised
talking
hand.
about, can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you were talking about with the decorating the canes, I think maybe if they're wanting to put stripes on it or things like that, to maybe in that area, if there's some kind of a law, then maybe, encouraging the kids just to say decorate the handle of it. So at least they're still getting to do, something with their cane that's going to make it theirs. And then one thing with Melissa was asking, one of the things when I think working with the young kids and whenever you're encouraging them to use their canes and things like that, the one thing that, as parents, we'd have to remember is sometimes we are not as consistent with what we're doing and what we're wanting them to, do. So in that situation, a parent wants to be as consistent with keeping the child on task with whenever they're using their cane and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely, Winford. I remember as a child, my parents frequently saying to me, "Pick up your feet." It's like most kids, I drag my feet when I walked. Parents need to be prepared to give their children feedback. A blind child doesn't necessarily see the things that are going on around them or perceive them in quite the same manner as their sighted counterpart. They don't necessarily understand that you should turn and point your nose at the sound of a person's voice, or that you should use a cane effectively so that you don't run into something, or you shouldn't go swinging it around like a baseball bat because you might hurt someone or damage something. Parents have a big responsibility with that, as they do with their sighted children. If a child is tending to have mannerisms such as rocking or rolling their head, early on, correct that so that they are showing proper types of social behaviors that are going to make it easier for them to be accepted by their peers and by others. Now, as far as the cane goes, decorating the handle, decorating, hanging something on the cane. If it's in an area where there's relatively strict laws, you do want that white cane out there where it is visible. But if a child is not going to be traveling out on their own around the street, they're young enough that they need to be accompanied by a parent. And if they want to stripe around their cane, I don't see the harm in that. It's a lot to do with what the laws say in your state, but also what is appropriate from an age standpoint. I'll make one other point here too. Sometimes blind kids, who would believe, will misbehave. They will do things with their cane that they shouldn't do, like maybe break the window in mom's curio cabinet or something along those lines. And the parent's instinct might be to take the cane away. I would want to discourage parents from doing that. Yes, discipline your child. Discipline your child as you would any other child for misbehaving. But don't put the idea of taking the cane away as a proper punishment. You want your child to learn to use the cane properly and to understand what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do with the cane. And the one thing you don't want them to do is to associate not using the cane properly with something really bad, or using the cane as something bad. So we want to make sure that we're treating a blind child very much the same way as we do any other child. We might do a little more instruction of one kind or another, or different kind of instruction on certain things, but make sure that the child is experiencing the world around them as much as any other child does.
I think Carol has one more question or comment.
Okay.
I do. I think this is my last question.
Okay.
A lot of us have children who have additional disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, are there any ways that adaptations can be made so that children with additional disabilities can also use a cane?
Okay, well, are you talking about physical types of disabilities, or just in general secondary disabilities?
Well, I guess in general, but if you want to give some details on the various categories, some kids have comprehension difficulties, some kids have the physical difficulties. So just wondering if is it like no way for those kids, or is there some way that they too can enjoy some independence?
It's one of those things where each child is an individual, and instructors and family members sometimes have to be very creative. If a child has difficulty gripping a cane, finding some type of modification that allows them to hold onto the cane and spark the cane is a possibility. There's so many different ways that a child might have that kind of physical difficulty that it can't give a precise example. It might be something as simple as the child wearing a glove so that they have a little more grip on the cane. It might be something as involved as some type of sort of brace that the child can have on their hand to help them hold the cane. There can be many different solutions to those things. It should never be assumed that a child cannot. Now, I mostly work with adults. I had a student several years ago who had a lot of difficulty with her hands. And everything I was trying just wasn't working. And finally, I said to her, now, of course, this is an adult, but I said, here's what the cane needs to do. It needs to tap on the right when you're stepping forward with your left foot, and it needs to tap on the left when you're stepping forward with your right foot. And I said, what can you do? Is there a way that you can make that happen? And it took her a little bit of experimenting, but she found a way that she could do it. And so that can also be an approach, allowing the person children can be very creative. So there's a lot of ways they can do that. Other types of disabilities, hearing loss can be very challenging in addition to vision, to blindness. And so working with a child, not assuming that they can't do things because they can't hear well, taking them out, getting them into situations, find out what it is they can hear, find out what they can really use from the environment. Children with intellectual disabilities, it's in many cases going to be a little bit slower process, but they can learn to use a cane. And if it starts early enough in their life, over time, they will learn through muscle memory and experience how to use that cane to help themselves stay safe. And like other children, they'll learn how to use echolocation and other cues from the environment to help them travel and help them to stay safe. Now, again, with any child, ask yourself the question, what would be my expectations for this child at this age if he or she were not blind? And it'll really help you to get some perspective on what is appropriate, but don't allow yourself to sell them short. I've seen a lot of people that over the years that your initial expectation might be, boy, I don't know how this is going to work. And those folks have turned out to be really very good at managing the world around them. And so, there's no one simple, one size fits all answer when it comes to anyone that's learning non-visual skills.
That's an incredibly hopeful answer, and it keeps all the doors open. Thank you.
Yeah, bad.
Well, I really want to thank you, Jeff, for your time, and I really thank all those who asked questions. I think this is going to be a really great recording for our parents to listen to. Are there any other questions, Kristen? Because I do know that we are getting after 9 o'clock, so I certainly don't want to cut people off, but I also do want to be respectful of time.
Mary Jo Hartle put in the chat box that we addressed the idea of age appropriateness and when and where to help a child use a cane, but it may be helpful to talk about how early parents can introduce canes to their children and some methods of doing so, like for toddlers or pre-walkers, etc. And I know Jeff addressed it a little bit.
Well,
yeah, letting your baby play with a cane, that's a great one.
Yes, absolutely. Give them the chance to be exposed to it right away. And of course, one of the things that I mentioned also is a teaching cane for the parent. One of the techniques that we've used in Nebraska, and I believe it's used elsewhere, is for a small child to be walking in front of their parent while their parent is using a cane, and the child reaches up with their hand and feels the movement of the cane as it's arced across in front of the two of them as they walk. And this allows the child to get sort of an idea of, well, okay, this is how this works. This is how I get, the cane moving. And they also, by holding on to the shaft of the cane, can start to feel some of the vibration and pulses that come through the cane from its contact with the ground. And of course, going out for a walk with your child once they are at the point where they are moving around pretty well with a cane, parent with a cane, child with a cane, and certainly for the parent to use learning shades while they're doing this, to help out the parents if they're concerned about how do I keep track. Some bells on the shoes with the little ones are really great. And take my advice, when the bells stop ringing, you better go find out what it is they're into, because it's a sure sign they're up to something. I don't know, I hope that was helpful.
I think the more you can play games as well, listening to sounds especially, it's so important that children start learning at a young age that when their cane finds something, they can tell a lot about what it might be just based on what sound it makes. And so when my kids were real little, we would just, even changing from carpet to tile, or from tile to carpet, or finding a vending machine and banging on it, or chairs, or we made a lot of noise, but that was part of it. And that was really, to me, what I wanted to do to make sure that my girls were really able to kind of connect that, oh, that's why I have my cane. It's not just this thing that mom keeps telling me I have to carry, and that, I'm lucky because I'm blind as well, so I carry mine all the time.
Right.
But, I really wanted them to kind of start learning. The other one that was big in our house was both of our girls were really timid on stairs. And so the quicker that we could kind of help them learn that they could use their canes on stairs, that they could feel how steep a step was, or how shallow it was, or when the stairs ended, or when the stairs began, that was a really big thing for us. And just kind of like helping them to take their hand and, okay, feel with your cane. What do you feel? Oh, that's that next step. And again, it's a lot of talking when they're that little, and really explaining what it is that their cane is feeling, because they're not going to know that unless you tell them. So
well, and having them crawl up and down the steps as well when they're little, so that they know what the steps feel like.
Definitely.
I also would encourage parents, go out to public places. Maybe there's an escalator running across the way, and ask your child, what do you think that is? What's making that sound? And then go over and explore it. Of course, being very careful. A small child can get hurt with an escalator, so you have to be careful of that, no matter sighted or blind. Or, if there's a fountain, and I don't know if they have fountains in malls anymore, although our fountains seem to have gone away in malls out here. But if you can, hear the sound of the fountain, let the child go and find out what that is. If they get a little wet, that's life, So giving kids the chance to get out and explore. And one of the things that Joe Cutter always pointed out, and this is absolutely one of the most critical things, it is self-motivated movement. Parents shouldn't be dragging children here and there. I mean, yes, there's times children need to walk holding onto their parents' hands. But as much as possible, invite your child out to explore the environment. Let them go out there and find out what there is, and they'll be much better off for it. Oh, and let them play with cardboard boxes. It's a great concept developer.
Well, I think on that note, we are going to wrap up this first session of the Cane Walk. Jeff, you do tell parents to write to you. Maybe you should give your contact information one more time, just in case people do have questions. And of course, we're very excited to be matching families with their Cane Walk instructors. And I mean, I know I was matched with mine, and I'm very excited about that. And I know other families are being matched with theirs as well. But how do families get a hold of you just in case they have additional questions or comments?
Okay, so my email address here at home is Deb and Jeff, DEBANDJEFF at allophone, ALLOPHONE.com. And my phone number for my cell phone is area code 402-489-9458. And you're welcome to call or text. Now, I will warn you that I have my phone set up to keep the guys who want to fix my computer from calling me on a regular basis. So just please leave a voicemail and I will call you back.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. The National Organization of Parents of Blind Children thank all of you for your time this evening. We thank all the instructors for spending time with families. We thank all of the families for registering for our cane walk. It's always extremely exciting to put up a form and kind of wonder, is anybody out there, anybody interested? And then all of a sudden you see people register, and that's very, very heartwarming for all of us. And thank you, a huge thank you to Jeff, who has just done a fantastic job keeping all of this on track, keeping all of the pieces moving. And there were many, many pieces, and definitely matching all of our, or helping to match. And Michelle Gipp, I think, has been doing a lot of things to help match, and I really appreciate that. So thank you all so much. And thank you very much to Kristen Sims for hosting. And I think this brings us to the end. Please make sure that you come back to our debrief sessions. They are July 13th and July 15th. We'll make sure that we send out reminders about the times of those. The 13th, though, is, or the links for those, I'm sorry, the times are 8 o'clock Eastern on the 13th. And if I'm remembering correctly, 11 o'clock Eastern AM on the 15th. But we will make sure that we send out information, and that will be a time for you as families to ask questions, to kind of connect with one another, and really talk about how the cane walk has helped and how it has gone in this virtual setting, which we're very interested in, since this is the first time that we have done this. So,
Melissa,
thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you to you and to all of the members, Carol and Penny, and everyone else, it's Kristen and everyone who's been involved in making this work. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our skills with family.
Well, thank you for sharing them. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you all so much. And we look forward to connecting with all of you virtually as the couple weeks progress. Have a great night.